My name is Paul Turner, and I was the little boy that was in the photograph. I was taken when I was 5.5 years old, and it was nice summer's days I can remember, and a load of us were out playing and just generally mucking about.
I was in here with Mel Jones. You came in and you invited us outside to have a photograph taken, and that was it. I remember it extremely well. I think we'd probably had a few pints by the time that you came in and took the photograph.
I think at the time that the photograph was taken, I'd be about 13 years of age. Slade, Rod Stewart, those were my favourite. I remember having rows off the teacher in school because I'd written all over my school satchel, and it wasn't allowed in those days.
In 1971, while a 19-year-old photography student, I started photographing the people of my hometown Merthyr Tydfil in the South Wales valleys. At first, I just took pictures of my family, like my parents Irwin and Irville, my brother Martin and my auntie Rhoda, her husband Uncle Les, and Shinkin, my grandfather's half-brother. Then I started taking pictures of people in the street. Sometimes people invited me into their homes to take their pictures. I must have taken hundreds of pictures of ordinary people. Then I put them all away in a box. Nearly 40 years later, I rediscovered the box. I was intrigued by the people I had photographed. Suddenly, they didn't seem so ordinary anymore. Some of them looked as if they drifted in from a previous age. It seemed inconceivable that I'd been part of their world. When I showed the pictures to other people, they found them just as fascinating as I did. I was asked to put together an exhibition, and a publisher brought out a book with a selection of the pictures. But I kept finding myself wondering what had happened to the people I'd photographed. No doubt, many of them would be gone by now, but what had become of the others? And what had become of my hometown? To find out, I returned to Merthyr. I spent the first 20 years of my life in Merthyr Tydfil, a town of 55,000 people. 200 years ago, it was discovered that there were seemingly limitless supplies of iron ore and coal hidden in the ground. From a village of just 40 people, Merthyr mushroomed to a town of 90,000. But by the time I was taking my photographs, the iron and coal had run out, and Merthyr had lost a third of its population. The close-knit community, fostered by the dangerous work the men did underground, was becoming history. People moved away. The grand old buildings of the town fell into disrepair, and the centre of Merthyr crumbled. At the now overgrown Castle Cinema, I once saw Ben-Hur, and a few years later, Pink Floyd. In the last 10 years, new office blocks have appeared on the edge of the town, making Merthyr look like any other British city. In spite of all these changes, as I walked the streets of Merthyr, it felt as if I was surrounded by the ghosts of the people I'd photographed. Di the Back, a retired collier. I caught him returning from the post office where he had collected his pension. As he came towards me, Di told me off in his frail voice, saying nobody would want to see a photograph of him. I remembered how right here I once heard someone shouting, "I am God." I had no idea who he was. He just stood there shouting and then asked me to take his photograph. Approaching my nan's house, I was half expecting her to be standing in the doorway, waiting my arrival as she did on that summer's day all those years ago. Coming from the house, the smell of bacon. It was the last photograph I took of her. She passed away that winter, just after Christmas. Now, people I've never met live in her house. While some areas of Merthyr didn't change that much, others like Georgetown disappeared completely. Georgetown dated from the early 19th century. Its small houses were packed together, producing a tight-knit community where everybody knew everybody.
A lot of fun being a child in Georgetown. You could do it mostly what you wanted to. Like adults, and it didn't bother you much. Parents didn't. You just left your own devices. A lot of us just could go around together, playing, and so we used to do is just mess about in the gardens or play touch and explore different alleys and explore houses. When you're a child, a day was lasted forever. You go out in the morning after breakfast, then nobody come and get you, and if it was dinner ready, you just left out the garden, your food was left on the table, and when you come back in the evening, it was stone cold, but you had to eat it before you go to bed, otherwise you'd have nothing the following day. The only time you could have toys was at Christmas time. You appreciated more what you had. I got 2 children, a boy and a girl. Daughter's 14 and my son is 20. He's out in Canada now, he is. Looking for a job. I've worked on a farm and a cemetery, and now I'm currently in OP Chocolates working. I've been there for 9 years on and off, and I make different chocolates. Creams of mint, orange, vanilla, chocolate, maize. Everybody in them days either wanted to be an astronaut or just, like the pirates on the films, hunting for treasure. That's what most of us wanted to do when we were kids, but it didn't work out that way, did it?
Not everybody let go of their dreams. This was Tex Jones, the father of a school friend. Tex took me to the disused Morlais quarry to be photographed. He said it reminded him of the Grand Canyon.
My name is Wayne Jones, I'm Tex's son. He died in 1981. He's 58, which is the same age as I am now, actually. Well, my father's always been interested in the West, but I think he liked the guns. I think he liked the ethos of the West. He wished he was born in that time, I think. The children always just shout out to him, "There's that man in the hat again, the cowboy." But he didn't really care. In fact, I think he was rather flat about it, actually. This stool is one that my father made. It's shaped in a saddle, and this is his favourite seat when he's watching the Westerns on television. And sometimes he's open a can of beans and eat them as well. uncooked of course. And whenever there's a toss draw on television, he always used to put his gun and holster on to see if he could be faster than him. And I used to have to time him on a stopwatch. On several occasions he was faster than John Wayne, so I used to make his day, that did. I used to ask him if he named me after John Wayne, but he always used to deny it. But I think it's fairly certain that he did. He had a first heart attack, so wasn't able to work. So he developed his hobby of leatherwork, and he used to make all sorts of things, belts, purses, wallets, and this kept him occupied for days on end. He's also interested in the American Civil War and became a member of the Southern Skirmishers, which is a reenactment society. And he made his own uniform, so I got the jacket on here now as part of it. He used to put his uniform on for fancy dress competitions and used to wear it himself around the house. That was one of the ambitions. He always wanted to go to America. He had an auntie living in Florida who emigrated, but he could never afford the airfare. He would have wanted to visit the Alamo, but it never came about, unfortunately. I missed him when he died. I missed him ever since. Though I still think of him every day.
I was photographing some ironworkers' cottages when a girl appeared from one of the houses.
Obviously, as you can see from the photograph, the clothes were very short at the time, with the high platform shoes and very bright colours. Any colour seemed to go at the time. The little dog, which was a Welsh Wirehead Terrier called Skipper, we'd had him from a little pup. Very placid, obedient dog. I always remember my father on the garden wall with the dog there, and he would just stand perfectly still and my father would clip him. He was a very lovely dog, very sad when Skipper died. So not long after that photograph was taken, I went to Cyfarthfa High School where I met my current husband, Howard Griffiths, and we were 15 at the time. And I can still remember the look on my father's face when we got engaged at 17. It was my grandmother's house, this one. And then when my grandmother died and we got married in 1977, we moved into this house. We've been married for 32 years this year. 2 children. Louise, who's 29, coming up this year, and Tracy will be 25. 3 grandchildren. This house has been a very happy, lucky house, and I hope I never would have to move from here.
One day, after visiting my grandfather in hospital, I stopped off for fish and chips in Church Street. The same Chinese family owned the fish and chip shop and the town's only Chinese restaurant.
My name is Nai Liu. I came from Hong Kong in 1968 to come to Merthyr to help my father run 2 little businesses. One is a restaurant and one is a fish and chip shop. My father already been here about nearly 12 years to establish some kind of business. And we never saw each other for when I was about 3. Me and my brother, my sister, like, we were living in a one-parent family, like. When he decided to get us over to Great Britain, and we thought it was great. I know, go to well, we didn't know Wales existed at the time. We thought England or London. We thought we'd come to London, to be honest. We're so excited because you see, only time we see London is in those movie, like. We were really excited. And when we arrived in Merthyr, I thought, that's a strange place, very quiet. I said, where's the people come from to buy food? I was living in a city at the time, it's called Kowloon, and it's noisy, it's busy, people just rushing about. And soon I came to Merthyr, I noticed people quite relaxed, you know. Actually, I thought they were a bit nosy at the time, but then when you look back, they were just friendly people. When we come over, it's like chow mein, like fried noodles, and fried rice with chicken. I thought, how's this? But it worked, people like it, you know. We ended up eating it ourselves, and it was quite nice, actually. I didn't realise how many people come out special after about 11:30. They call stop tap, then I didn't know what that meant. It's people, you know, stop drinking after 11, and they all feel hungry after a few pints, and they all rush in and they just spend money, like. When people go out, they're happy, they have a little sing-song at the end of the night, you know. There's hardly any violence, you know, real violence. I never saw much violence, except when they're too drunk, they have a couple of punches, and when they're on the floor, that's it, the fight is over. I was only 19 at the time, but I have to take a lot of responsibility. I have to work by the counter, plus make sure everybody's, you know, in order. And it was quite hard work, but it's fun and well rewarded as well. Because in those days, there wasn't much competition, and the business was good, and, you know, we did earn a few quid, like. My son's working with me as well now, and he's been here nearly 2 years now, and he's doing a good job. And I quite, you know, enjoy working alongside with him. You know, we got a good teamwork here. When I used to work with my father, I thought I would be quite happy working with him until he retired. But it wasn't the case, you know. After a few years, I knew I have to go. Me and my father had too much confrontation, you know, and it's no good then. It's going to spoil our relationship. So I did the right thing, and we're still friends afterward, like, you know. It's hard at the time. It was heartbreaking for me and my father because we were doing so well together. But it just, a couple of silly, you know, thing we just cannot compromise. After a while, when my father sold the business, they decided to go back home, and I do miss them. But I think I've done the right thing.
Nye's customers, coming in for fish and chips at the end of an evening's drinking, didn't have much choice in where to eat, but all the more in where to drink. At one time, there were over 200 pubs in Merthyr.
At the time the photograph was taken, I was a young police officer. I guess by the photograph and my hairstyle at the time that I was in plain clothes or CID, because I could never have got that hairstyle underneath a police helmet. I used to be a detective, and I worked that out from the photograph. The flares, the suede jacket, the big collars, the fuzzy hair. I look back at that photograph now and cringe. I mean, we were all influenced by the TV programmes. The Sweeney were my heroes at the time. And I guess everybody tried to emulate them that was in plain clothes in the CID at the time. Mel Jones was in the photograph with me. Mel was quite a bit older than me. He was an experienced fly fisherman. But there was a group of us who used to go fly fishing together. Coincidentally, he had a son who was in the police force, in the Metropolitan Police, and he died on duty tragically in a road accident when he was in his young 20s. And Mel took that very, very badly. And Mel also died fairly young. I spent 30 years in total in the police force, retiring as an inspector. I indulged my hobby of fishing. I socialised quite a bit, put on a heck of a lot of weight. And then I went back to work, and I now work for my son-in-law, who's a solicitor. It's quite funny that my former colleagues now call me Darth Vader because I've turned to the dark side because I now work for the defence. Sadly, perhaps in many people's opinions, I haven't moved. I still live in the village of Ilgerig after 37 years, and I still use the 6 bells very frequently. At the time, the 6 bells was like a social centre, if you like. It was used on a regular basis during the afternoon. A lot of the older people who'd retired would come to the pub more or less on a daily basis. If they didn't show up, particularly the widowers and the single elderly people, the alarm would be raised within a short hour of their usual arrival time. And somebody would go and check up and knock on their door, make sure they were okay. Ilgerig really was a community.
Apart from the 200 pubs, there were also many clubs, like the Ilgerig Social Club. The landlord and his family lived above the bar.
The memories of the club still stick with me even to this day. There were many characters that used to frequent the pub on a sort of daily basis, and people like Corchin, Lupin Tip, Daiby, and the club used to be my playground. The old guys used to get me to do various things behind my mother's back. When the coal men used to arrive, they used to put me on the back of the wagon and I'd be covered from head to toe in coal dust.
And they're just sitting on the table trying to get him to say the word bastard. And I was behind the bar and shouting, "Don't you dare, don't you dare."
But at the time when I tried to do that, I was so naive that instead of going that way to hide it from my mother, I actually did it that way, in front of my mother.
He put his hand that side, and of course I heard him. And I shouted, and they told me to mind my own business. They were talking to him, and he was talking to them, not for me to interfere.
But the swearing came, I think, from Di, because his name was Di B. The B used to be an indication of the swear word that he used to say all the time.
And I think it stuck then. That's what they all called him from there. Everybody knew him as Di B.
I used to ask Di what the machine was in the toilet, and looking back now, it was a condom machine. And he replied to me that it was a sweet machine.
He came back down to me to the bar. He wanted money. I said, "What do you want money for?" "The chocolate machine." I said, "What chocolate machine?" "Chocolate machine up there." And he used to keep asking for money for that machine. Every time he'd go up the toilet, he had to have money to go up there.
Di was always around, and he was like an adoptive member of the family. He used to take me for walks all around sort of the region of Ilgerig, that we used to go down the Wine, we used to go up to the Winch. But he was a really genuine old guy.
We used to walk home with him in the night because he lived up the Winch in the caravan. After we finished in the bar, David and I would walk over him and sit on the duck pond. And then watching all the lights of Merthyr, and we'd sit there for ages talking in the night.
I currently work internationally as an IT consultant, and I travel all over the world to many different places, ranging from Africa to America to Australia, Singapore, Thailand, etc.
I didn't think that he would ever do as good as what he has done then. I'm very proud of him.
Here, on the site of Merthyr's present-day law courts, once stood one of the town's most legendary pubs, the Lamb. Of the Lamb, someone once said, "Rarely has such a galaxy of beauty, genius, talent and alcoholism been gathered together under one roof."
It didn't seem to make a difference at all what your background, what your past had been, what your job or profession was. Everybody was encompassed in the Lamb. Everybody loved the place. The atmosphere there was almost electric.
If you went in, the place would be uproar, continual uproar. Everybody shouting, everybody yelling, everybody laughing.
Teachers, doctors, lawyers, all mixed together in the Lamb.
They'd be singing virtually every night. People would have to sing loudly, full blast.
You had Dougie the Tramp, who'd come in very often because there was nowhere else to go, and he was always sure of a drink.
There'd be Harry Webb the poet. He'd come in, and all this would be continually happening. In fact, parts of the pub would be singing, others would be arguing, others would be just talking.
You couldn't go in the Lamb even on a wet Tuesday afternoon and not find a character to communicate with.
Central to the spirit of the pub was the landlord of the Lamb, John Lewis, better known as John the Lamb.
John was one of these characters who was always arguing and talking and loved the limelight. John would have gone along with anything as long as there was life, as something was happening. He was a part of it or the centre of it. John wanted to convey the image that he was very intelligent, so he used to end up saying strange things like catatonic or words that totally didn't fit, malapropisms. He'd always try to fit in a word to make himself or try to convince himself that this was an intellectual conversation. You couldn't talk to John without laughing. He'd always have something funny to say. You couldn't help but like John.
Working alongside John was barman Jim Cold Hands Ryan.
Jim Ryan. Jim Death, that's what they called him. Tall, not so much tall, but stooped with a big beak-like nose, Jim Ryan. Jim was a bit of a pain in the arse. There's no question about that. He wasn't a particularly nice sort of guy, but always moaning about something or other. He used to work for John Lewis, the undertaker, which was just opposite. As I said, what did you used to do over there in the undertakers then, Jim? Oh, he said, just shove cotton wool up stiff's arses. During the winter, a perfectly crystal clear dripper would have come on the end of his nose of mucus, but it wasn't green, it was perfectly clear and used to glisten in the lights, the soft lights of the Lamb. And as he poured the beer, he'd pour the beer and then bring it to you. Because of his stooped appearance, the drip used to drip off and you didn't know whether it went in the beer or not. But there you are, that's the sort of pub it was. You still drank the beer.
One night the bar was crowded, everybody was rushing around, there was a lot of singing going on. Suddenly somebody shouted from the back, "Get something to eat!" Jim slid open the cabinet with a fork. He plucked out a pie and he was just about to put it on a plate when somebody said, "Hey, Jim, there's a mouse in the machine." He didn't bat an eyelid. He tripped the pie off his fork, pierced the mouse and flicked him at the stove. Then looked back and said, "Do you want anything else with that?"
One of the regulars in the Lamb was Ronnie Williams, who was better known as the Brigadier.
He had a very, very unusual way about him, a very unusual voice, full of vibrance. He talked in a guttural sort of manner. "My God, I don't like this place. I hate the people of Merthyr. My God, I wish I was back in the Navy."
Surprisingly for those days, nobody made the slightest fuss over the fact that the Brigadier was openly gay. He was just another regular at the Lamb. This was Bill Griffiths, but nobody called him that. Everyone just knew him as Delilah.
Why, Delilah? He was always singing that. Beginning of the night, he'd sit down quiet. But then after a couple of drinks, up he'd get and he'd be dancing round the bar, singing Delilah. He'd go round the floor on his own, never anybody with him. And he'd be singing, he'd be dancing. They reckon he was the best bricklayers going, as long as you kept him away from a pub, because you wouldn't see him after. He'd be there for the rest of the day.
Delilah's living in Williamstown. In his travels around Merthyr getting drunk, he meets this guy who's also a bricklayer, who used to work for the Australian government in the jungles of Borneo. He'd come back, they were both drunks. He moves in with Delilah. Delilah's drunk, he's drunk. They go home one night, one up, one down, Williamstown. They start arguing about bricklaying. So, in their drunken stupor, mix up some compo, get some sand cement, went out the front garden, mixed it up, came back in, built a wall on the carpet in that room, divided it into two. When they woke up in the morning, who the hell had built a wall in the front room? They didn't know.
Lots of the guys that came in there to drown their sorrows, lots of the people found people to talk to in that they got sympathy, because Lamb was a great place for sympathy as well as wit. It wasn't only a place for poetry, for music, for entertainment. It was a place to discuss things with your friends. Nobody was without a drink, and it wasn't a consequence of people wanting to show their generosity. It was taken for granted. If somebody didn't have money, he'd always have a drink in his hand.
There was a cat that came over the Lamb from Tredegar. He used to walk over, all winds and weather. So one of the boys took pity on him. His father had died and he had a wonderful Crombie overcoat. Gave it to Gwynfor. John the Lamb presented it one night to her. He said, Gwynfor, there's an overcoat for you, worth a lot of money. Don't sell it for booze, wear it. And I want to see you over here next week with it on. The following week, Gwynfor came over, no overcoat. John said to him, he said, where's the overcoat? He said, I'm not wearing a good coat to a scruffy pub like this.
It was all too wonderful to last. On March the 31st, 1973, John served his last pint, and the Lamb was demolished to make way for Merthyr's new law courts. Delilah, who had spent so many happy hours on this very spot, turned out to be the only bricklayer capable of building the fancy window arches. The Express pub fortunately still exists, although nowadays it's a Chinese restaurant. It had a little backyard that for one afternoon became my studio. Of these regulars of the Express, for me the most intriguing one was Malcolm Griffiths. No chemical substance was too wild, no adventure too crazy for Malcolm. After I took some pictures of him, he wanted to take my picture too. I had worked in a quarry for 2 months to pay for my camera, and I couldn't stop thinking of his reputation as he pointed the camera at me.
I can't say I was a great friend of Malcolm's, because it was difficult to become a great friend of Malcolm's unless you were in the kind of lifestyle that he did. But I sort of liked the idea of being a reporter in some sense of the incredible lifestyle that people had.
I was at school with Des Barry. He'd become an author and had written a novel with a main character inspired by Malcolm.
I remember him with his crew like Melvin and Dennis, and for me they were always this sort of, I was younger than them, and also they had this fantastic reputation, you know, as being like the hardest men in Merthyr. Melvin for me was always a really scary character. I found him more scary than Malcolm because he said less. He wasn't a big smiler, that's for sure. He had a sort of brooding presence about him that I found. I don't think he was interested in communicating very much with people who weren't inside his circle. They would get themselves into these incredible fights. One fight, I remember them talking one time about how Tony and one of his mates was walking down Merthyr High Street, were jumped by a bunch of skinheads, and were fighting, trying to keep them off basically, because there was only Tony and his mate and a big crew of skinheads. And then Tony said, the next thing I knew, the whole crew of skinheads shifted to the left. And Malcolm and Dennis and Melvin were coming at them from the other side and immediately scattered them.
Today, of these three hard men, Malcolm, Melvin and Dennis, only Dennis is still alive.
I dream of him. I dream of him more than anybody else, you know, of my friends who are dead. Like, it's great to see him again, you know, in my dreams. You know, he's such a character anyway, you know. He was very similar. So, of course, we got on very well. Never, in all the years I knew him, never had an argument with him. Never once did we have an argument, because we didn't need it, you know. I went to jail to pick him up many a times when he was coming out of jail. We had some fun, you know. He's a hell of a boy. He was one of the worst drivers, right? Never go in a car with him. Never go in a car with him. I remember Joe Murphy or somebody, Billy Hines, nicked a Mother's Pride bread van years ago and bumped into me and Malcolm when we was up in Pond Stick. They were all in the back, you know, eating the cakes, the fresh cream cakes and the pasties. So I was in the back, you know, and I eating the pasties and the cake, talking to Joe Murphy, Billy Hines and everything like that. And it just suddenly dawned on me. I said, who's driving then? Malcolm was driving. We just crashed. It was pies, pasties and cakes everywhere, man, in the back of the van. Yeah, he was great fun. He was great fun.
There's a sort of joy in Malcolm that I found was quite contagious. Even though he was doing the most outrageous things and things I would never do in my whole life, there was still a kind of joy in what he did. He was going to push the limits of anything you could do to the max.
I was in the local on Malcolm's stag night. Sat at the table having a few drinks when the back door swept open, and in came this beautiful young Arab stallion with Malcolm clung to his neck, and of course the horse reared up a bit like that, and he was slipping on the floor, kicked the tables and the drinks over. There was pandemonium. And of course, as he turned the horse to ride out, he forgot to duck, didn't he? And the horse and him banged their heads. Look, the horse fell over as well. But scrambled up, Malcolm was just on the floor, like he just knocked out he was. You know?
There's a story that Titch Jones told me about coming up on the promenade one day after a few beers, like on a Saturday night, and he heard a strange noise and found Malcolm under there muttering to himself and very upset. And Titch said to him, well, what's wrong, Malcolm? And he said, I was born in the wrong time, he said. I should have been a Viking.
Malcolm was riding a stolen Kawasaki motorbike with a police car chasing him when he lost control on a bend.
Instantly killed, you know? Instantly killed. It was such a sad day, like. Because he deserved to live, you know? He deserved to see his grandson and things, because you see his grandson now, he looks like Malcolm when he was young. You know? I knew Malcolm when he was maybe 10 years of age, something like that, with that impish grin that he had. And he looked like Roger Daltrey. Do you reckon? I reckon he did, anyway, you know?
Tommy Haynes was a real character in Hilgerrig. Big, strong man, very much the Hercules stand on Tommy. I don't think half of them then knew what his second name was. He was Tommy the Gravedigger to everybody. Tommy had his shed, and in the shed he had a cooker and a gas fire, and if you went there, it was like a little home. He had a 3-piece suite in there, and if anybody went there to looking for a grave or what, Tommy'd be in there with us. And sometimes you'd go in, and bacon would be smelling, or sausage would be smelling, and Tommy would say to you, now sit by there now, I'm just cooking some sausages, I'll show you the grave in half an hour's time. And he was really at home there, as though he had his home in the cemetery. There was no need for him to go home, he had everything in there. The only thing missing was a television set.
Tommy was my great step-uncle. 2 years after taking his picture, I made a short film about him.
Good morning, Bert. Morning, Tom. Right, morning. Don't see morning. Goodbye.
Tommy told me that when he was 21, a fortune teller at Blackpool had predicted that one day he would appear on television. Tommy had said to the fortune teller, "Don't be silly." But when I finished the film, it was shown on TV, and the fortune teller was proved right.
Mae'n oer fwrdd nhw. Mae'n oer rhywbeth. O, mae'n cytio. Mae'n hoffi gwaith nawr.
O, wel, pidych gweithio i galed nawr.
Ddim di galed.
Na feite. Bwyd da.
When Tommy had a funeral in there, if there was a grave going there and there was somebody from Winchvawr, then Tommy would find a grave nearby because all the Winchvawr people would be buried there. All the Hillgarrick people would try to be buried there, and he would put them all together like communities. He made that place like a village because he knew everybody there.
Oh, nice. Good.
You say to him, "Do you know where Jones from Clwyd is buried?" "Yeah, go down there now, 4 graves along, second row, and he's there." Knew like that. And I can remember being a gravestone once, right up at the top, and of course they were tombs. The big headstone, but of course he took the entrance stone away. And Tommy had taken his headstone away. Only he had done it, nobody else could have moved it. Otherwise, you'd have a machine up there. But Tommy could lift it, he's a strong boy. And he lifted his entrance stone to one side. But of course, now you ought to make sure inside, before the next coffin comes along, that the plates inside are still in order. Tommy, now, of course, clever Dick, he climbed in. And as he climbed in, the entrance stone fell back. And Tommy was stuck in there. He couldn't move the entrance stone out. It was jammed. Tommy was in there for about 2 hours, I'm sure. And when he got to the cemetery that day, Tommy was singing. That's all you could hear was his grave. The headstone had fallen back. You wouldn't have thought anybody had moved it. And then all these songs coming from it. Well, anybody coming up there would have died 1,000 deaths. They would have thought somebody who was dead was singing. And Tommy was singing all these modern songs and hymns from inside it. And it was sealed. And Tommy was in there. We had to move him out. And the only way we'd get him out was to get 3 men to move the stone he had moved on his own. You could see how strong a boy he was. Didn't bother him. That's how Tommy was. He just took it, like, you know. Of course, there'd be a swearing words after he got out of mind knowing Tommy, but that was Tommy. When Tommy was at a funeral of a young person getting buried or something like that, or a tragic accident, somebody got killed underground, whatever it was. But when Tommy was doing the grave, you always noticed there was that wonderful respect with him. As tough a man as he was, and he was a tough boy, strong boy, good character, I always believed anyway. I know he lived life to the full. But if there was a sad funeral, Tommy would stand there very respectful. Others sometimes would watch him filling the grave up. You'd never hear a spade going down even. He would do it so respectfully because he knew what the circumstances were. And he would even come over to families and he'd say to them, "Look, it'd be best if you went home now, for respect, and let us do our job and you go home, you know, and have your tea." You could look back and say, that was nice. And as rough of a man he was, he had respect. And I admired him for it. Tommy wasn't sort of bloke that was deeply religious, but yet at the same time, you could look at him and say he was religious because he would help old people in there. And that was important. That's part of what religion is about anyway, you know, helping people that can't help themselves.
Over there, my beautiful wife lies. She's been there now for 23 years. Under the tree, and I think she's in a wonderful spot where the tree stops all the rain falling on the grave. And undoubtedly, in due course, I'll be lying there myself in the near future, and I think that'll be the end of Kevin's cemetery as far as I'm concerned.
I was there when he got buried. I was the minister, and the community was there. Winchvawr, Hillgarrick and Clwyd, they were all there. And it was a wonderful funeral, and we were talking in the funeral about him, you know. And it became a funeral where everybody started laughing at the things he did. But that's what Tommy wanted. He was a lovely guy. He was part of our community.
That came out by accident, because I didn't realise you were there. As I realised you were there, you wouldn't see me. I am a background boy. I it been in front.
I hadn't expected Mansell to still be alive. The last time I had seen him was 20 years ago. He had just undergone major brain surgery, and I didn't think he was going to live for much longer. I was even more surprised when I found out he'd become the manager of a supermarket. Mansell had been born with learning difficulties and couldn't speak until he was 6. Maggie Perrin was his great-aunt.
In the photograph, you'll find Maggie, and you'll see me in a bit of a shocked state, holding up Queenie, the dog, who always loved to be fussed and bothered with, and Maggie always used to think more of the dog and what she thought of anybody else. She was an animal lover, and she didn't care about nobody else having food as long as the dogs had food. That was the truth. She was a toughie of the original type. She'd go to town on Saturday, but before she'd go to town, she'd have a glass of Malibu and a cup of whiskey together and go to town with that. That she used to do. Malibu and whiskey together. I never heard of it, but she used to drink it. We, as kids, could go up the mountain, burn the grass, go out on the road. You didn't have to worry about meeting this one or meeting that person or meeting the other, because there's nothing like that about. Nothing at all. And then you could play with hours and hours if there was any water coming down the streams. You could make a dam and then open the dam up, and then you'd have a flood down the main. Oh, it's fantastic it was. And you had the wellies on. And you were soaked. Coming down. I was the happiest childhood up until I was 12 years of age, or 13. And then my mother died, and everything to get a little bit more serious than what it was. There was well, not fight for yourself. No, that's too terrible to think. But there wasn't that, you know, the cut. There wasn't that cut there. There wasn't that, well, you fell, boyo, so I'll give you a cut there. There wasn't that there. It was gone. So she died on the Wednesday morning. She was buried on a Saturday morning. And I don't know if you know them tipsy houses? Well, I went up there and I cried my eyes out. And that was it. Well, the responsibility came on to my father. He found himself, he had to do all the shopping and the cooking and sometimes the washing. There were no washers about, no fridges about, no central heating. We just had to go, if you wanted coal, we had to go up the mountain to get it. Things now are much easier because I'm living in a new house. You know, that's all I got to do now is pick up a phone. These days, people are more independent. There's no mixing. Everybody is in each house. They come home from work, they go into the door, they slam the door, until the following morning, and then straight in the car or walked under the bus. No saying, well, hello, Daisy, I would die or whatever else. They don't want, people don't want to know. That's all they want to do is do their own thing. There's no community anymore.
The sense of community that Mansell remembers started to disappear when local politicians decided that areas like Georgetown had no place in 20th century Wales.
Georgetown being pulled down was destruction of a community. It's like the council just wanted everything to wipe the slate clean and just start afresh. Don't think they cared about the people or communities in them days.
It wasn't only a new town that the local politicians wanted. They demanded a new MP too. Stephen Owen Davies, known affectionately as S.O., had been the town's MP for almost 40 years. The local Labour Party decided he was too old at 84 and wanted a younger candidate to replace him. I photographed him going to meet local Labour Party officials in the town hall. In the 1971 election, he stood as an independent and won. But even S.O. couldn't hold back history. The once splendid town hall was sold off by the council and for a while became a nightclub. Now it's been standing empty for many years. While the town hall crumbled, other parts of town saw office blocks and shopping centres rising out of the ground. One day, I'd gone to take pictures of Lewis, a miner who also taught the piano, and his sister Martha. What would they say if they now saw their old home? Would they appreciate all the new comforts? Or would they feel that something had gone missing?
I think it's a changed place. You've lost the old characters that used to live there. In the old days, you used to have the green shop, you used to have the post office, and the various people used to run those places that you'd know and be able to talk to. A lot of the new developments have gone up. It's changed the character of the old kind of village into this modern sprawl that seemed to encroach the side of the mountain.
I think I'd like to go back to the safety of the streets and having my grandchildren being able to play out and having more of the neighbours, whereas you could leave your door open, you could go out in the street, your neighbours were always there for you, whereas this day and age, you're afraid to let the children go out. You never had that in those days. Everybody looked out for each other.
I'd love to go back them days. They're better than these days. A lot better.
I wouldn't want to go back to that time because there was so much that I enjoyed about it. I think that it would be spoiled. It would be totally spoiled. And I feel that you should never return to a place where you were once happy. It'll never be the same again.
I certainly would go back to the Lamb because it was absolutely fantastic. It only lasted basically from 1968 to say 1972. But what a 4 years. Yeah, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
I think the experience of living in Hilgerig, it was the best time of my life. It was my playground, really.
I've often said you would come back to Merthyr, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. And perhaps now with the baby coming, that he would come back here. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
There's good things in life and there's bad things in life. You know, I just suffer from this. But if you leave it get hold of you, your life is not going to be worth very much. Now, as I've had this for not for 30 years, and I was supposed to have pegged out a long time ago, many years ago. I'm pretty well, breathing, eating, drinking. That's all I want. Happy, watch telly. All right, I can't walk. I'd like to walk. I'd like to go down to town, walk around, have a cup of tea. Can't. You've got to be real. But on the other hand, I got a brain in my head. I can see, I can speak, I can hear. And there's a lot of people haven't got that. So I got to be grateful, and I'm very happy. It's been a marvellous house, and I don't intend to leave it until I do have a wooden box. And that's the end of it.
In 2003, the Brigadier, Ronnie Williams, died. But even 30 years after the Lamb had made way for the law courts, his former fellow drinkers felt that there was only one place where the Brigadier would rest in peace.
And so one night they furtively took Ronnie's ashes in a coffee jar and buried them in a border alongside the town hall. That was the end of that. No ceremony, just this was done very furtively at night and the boys walked away. However, a few weeks later, imagine Colin Winters' surprise when he was walking along the high street and saw them digging up all the flower beds again. Colin rushed over, retrieved the Brigadier from amongst the flower beds in his coffee jar and took him home. And the ashes of the Brigadier stayed on his mantelpiece in Pendarren for the next couple of months until the refurbishment work was done, when the process was repeated and the boys went down again at night and reburied Ronnie in the flower beds. Where he is to this day, it was a fitting end to the Brigadier because number one, he didn't like coffee, and two, he didn't particularly like flowers.